sounds bad.
But I'll go be good.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin this morning's service with a song, and the opening song is Cabaret. You'll find that in our new book, which is done in alphabetical order. So, Cabaret. This morning to the first existentialist congregation of Atlanta. We are a spiritual community philosophically based on existentialist and feminist principles. We are dedicated to human liberation. We make our home in the old stone church, which was hand-built over 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We still have a wonderful relationship with that congregation. We acknowledge that racial hostility drove those African Americans from the area, and we honor them and the powerful history of this place, this sanctuary, this building, and the surrounding area. We also acknowledge that in the 1800s, the Muscogee Creek people were driven from this land, and we support justice for all indigenous people. I'm very excited to be the facilitator this morning. My name is Reverend Marcia Mitchener. I would like to take the opportunity to welcome any visitors that we might have. If we have a visitor, if you would like, we ask you to stand and introduce yourself and tell us how you came to be here this morning. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Hi, Dan Geller. I'm here to see Franklin.
All right. Glad to have you here this morning. If you would like to know any more about us in our program, we do have a connection card. Feel free to fill that out and place it in the collection plate when that comes around, and we'll be glad to send you information. It's not a solicitation. It is simply a way of helping you to learn more about us if you would like to. Anyone else? Okay. Franklin is talking today about courage. When I looked up some of the people that I am particularly fond of in terms of quotes, and these are some of the things that I found. The first is from Rollo May. Courage is not a virtue or of value among other personal values like love or fidelity. It is the foundation that underlies and gives reality to all other virtues and personal values. Without courage, our love pales into mere dependency. Without courage, our fidelity becomes conformism. It's Rollo May. How about birthdays and anniversaries? Who has a birthday or an anniversary today? Let's see. Anyone?
Susan B. Anthony.
Susan B. Susan.
Yeah. You're going to say yours till next week?
Okay,
Okay. All right. So, if we don't have no birthdays or anniversaries, why don't we have another song? Dr. Jean, what is it?
good. Great. You all on your handout, mountain song, mountain woman song. Please rise in body and spirit as you're willing and able, and sing out. I think we'll play it through. I don't know. Do you all know this?
Yes.
Pauline? Okay, good. We'll just do it.
Have dreamed on this mountain. I have dreamed on this mountain. First I was mother's daughter, and you can't just take my dreams away. Traveling machine, I was born to break the water, and you can't just take my dreams away without me fighting. No mountain raised up in the water, come down, come till the day. Come here, take my mountain, will be made. Come here, I have dreamed on this mountain, because I was mother's daughter, and you can't just take my dreams away. Now we can watch it, so you can't just take my dreams away. Now we can fight it, so you can't just take my dreams away.
It's great to hear a choir this morning. And y'all are doing a great job too, so it's all coming together, so make a joyful noise. If anyone has a community announcement, if you would please write it down and bring it up to me at some point, and I will read those at the end of the service. There's usually some blank paper there around the back table if you need something to write on. I'm very pleased to see everyone this morning. We have a cold, chilly day. I'm glad that you came out to join us. And I'm aware that there is an awful lot going on in the world, both in other countries, but also right here at home. And I ask that you think about those that are specifically impacted by war and violence of any kind that's going on, and that you hold those people in your heart, and that you do whatever you feel that you can do to participate in a process of trying to make this world a better place that reduces violence and creates a space of love. I'd like for us to take several minutes to have silent meditation. This is an opportunity for you to sit quietly with your brothers and sisters. We have candles on either side of the sanctuary. We'll ring the chimes after a few minutes to bring us back into this space. Today's speaker is Franklin Abbott. Franklin hardly needs an introduction, but I will say that he is a retired psychotherapist. He is a poet extraordinaire. He is a longtime friend of First Existentialist and a speaker, and I'm very excited to bring Franklin forward to hear what his message is today.
I somehow or other thought that I would be in a different place after my knee replacement surgery than I am. I feel like I wouldn't have planned to do this today. But, you know, I got up the stairs, a friend brought me over. But everything Jeannie's done, you know, has brought tears to my eyes. So I want to talk about courage. And one of the things that I thought about in putting my talk together is that, for me at least, courage is an action. It's not an idea. It's something that we do. And I think about all of us here today that probably the first courageous thing that we did is we put one of our feet on the floor. We we got up, we put a foot on the floor, and then it went from there. And, you know, another thing that we do without thinking about it very much is that we all came as ourselves today. You know, everybody here is, you know, an exact, you know, authentic human being who decided that you were going to wear certain things and dress a certain way and show up at a certain time, and all of that is an act of courage because none of us are normal. This is not the place where normal people come. If they do, they're welcome, of course. But you know, if we go back to the founding of First D, the founding minister of Lanier Clance was one of the most unusual and that I've ever met. And it was an act of courage, really, for him to move out into the world because he always dressed colorfully. You know, he always, you know, had a little lavender, you know, beret that he would wear. Well, not always. He had several different berets that he would wear. But, you know, you could not mistake Lanier for a normal person. And he just went out into the world and did it anyway. So, you know, it's also true that each of us has the courage to have taken a somewhat different spiritual path, probably from our families of origins and the communities that we grew up in. There was nothing like this when I was growing up. You know, I was in the Presbyterian church, and we were all dressed alike, and we had, you know, very somber hymns, and, you know, there was a order in which the Bible was read, and, you know, sometimes there would be, you know, some little sandwiches, you know, with the crust cut off, and, you know, stuff like that after the church service. But here we are different. Here we are different. Each of us is a unique individual who doesn't do much to hide that uniqueness, and we can celebrate that and celebrate that with each other because it is courageous to be different and to go out into the world and be yourself. It has taken a lot of courage for us to navigate the pandemic. When you think about the courageous person that you were, that you had to make decisions on a daily basis to protect yourself, to protect your loved ones, that we somehow made it through and we took care of each other. You know, sometimes someone was ill and we had to go and, you know, do what we could to make things better for that person, take somebody to get a vaccination. There were many different small acts of courage, you know, that got us through. That little choices that we made that helped each other. You know, I lose track of time. It was in the 80s and 90s that we were also dealing with the AIDS epidemic. And First D provided a space once a month for a circle of healing. And that was a time when people who had HIV, people who cared about people who had HIV, came together here. We sat in a circle on the floor. We were much younger. And Beth York would play the piano. We would have a healing meditation. And it was just a space where we could come together very courageously and express love. It's very, very difficult for most of us to deal with the situation like your friend in the recovery center. You know, that's a hard thing to do, to go and visit someone who is ill. You know, it's hard for them. They're not in the best place. It's hard for us because this is previews of coming attractions. None of us is getting out of here without some disabling, something happening at some point, like the knee that I had fixed a couple of months ago. You know, it's courageous to listen to the news, my goodness. You know, I don't want to turn it off, I don't want to be uninformed, but it is an act of courage, you know, to sit and to watch and to think about the terrible catastrophes that are happening in parts of the world, the fact that we have war, the fact that we have famine. All of these things are difficult realities to live with and to hold. And then to figure out, well, how can I personally, you know, do something that might make a difference? You know, whether that is understanding something better, making a contribution. Again, it takes courage. It would be easier just to turn the damn stuff off. It takes courage to write a new story, a new song, to paint a new picture. You know, Jean is up here, a model of courage, singing a new song. That's not easy to do. That is not easy to do. And, you know, it's something that we know that as creative people, you know, it's very, very important for us to find the courage to be creative. Marcia mentioned Rollo May has a book called The Courage to Create. It's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it, particularly for people who, you know, are blessed and cursed with the creative gene. Probably that's just all of us. It takes courage to care. It takes courage to fall in love. It takes courage to fall out of love. It takes courage to mourn. And certainly, most of us are in mourning. You know, most of us have had a significant death within the past year. You know, hard to think about that. But we carry on. It takes courage to let the tears flow. It takes courage to comfort someone, to reach out. And it takes courage to sing and dance and laugh out loud and, you know, wear our colorful garments like dear Lanier. I want to talk about some individuals who inspire us. And maybe another word for that is that their examples encourage us. Because like Mary was saying, we didn't get here on our own. There were people along the way, and their courage paved the way for us to be able to have the lives and opportunities that we have. I know that you all will be honoring Susan B. Anthony soon. Susan B. Anthony's portrait is in the back of the sanctuary. She's one of the patron saints. Right above her is Martin Luther King, and great patron saints to have. She lived from 1820 to 1906, and she's known as one of the mothers of women's suffrage. She was born in a Quaker family, and she was used to women getting up in Quaker meeting when the Spirit moved them and talking. She did not know how unusual it was during the 1800s for women to speak in public. It did not occur to her that, you know, women couldn't do that. And so when her family was very politically active, they were abolitionists. She was friends with Frederick Douglass. You know, all the big abolitionists who came through the area that she lived in were in her living room. So when she went to abolitionist conventions, anti-slavery conventions, temperance conventions, and got up and tried to talk, people said, you know, that she should listen and learn. She was told to sit down and listen and learn. Obviously, she wasn't having any of that. Getting up and talking, and one of the things that we don't think about really is that almost everywhere, you know, they would put up flyers, you know, all over town that Susan B. Anthony was coming to give a talk. The police had to escort her in. There were mobs. You know, there were people throwing bricks. There were people with guns and knives. trying to prevent her from speaking, and many times she could not speak because the violence was such. She continued to do this throughout her life, on and on and on, as an older woman, often traveling by herself. One of my favorite Susan B. Anthony stories, and I'm sure many of you know it, is that in 1872, she and some of her sisters and some of the women in her town decided to register to vote. It was illegal for women to vote, but they went ahead and somehow or another got themselves registered. Well, then it was time to vote, and not all of the women who registered were allowed to vote, but Susan B. Anthony and her sister and several others talked the men at the polling station into allowing them to vote. They convinced them that they should be voting, and they went and voted. Well, she was arrested for it. And, taken to a kangaroo court with a, sexist male judge who, would not allow her to speak. She would speak anyway. Fined her $100, which would be about the equivalent of $2,300 in our money. Wow. She said she wasn't going to pay $1 of that, not $1 of it. Somehow or another, because it was controversial, it got wrangled out of court. But she continued to fight. And unfortunately, she didn't live long enough to see the 19th Amendment pass. On the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, former President Trump attempted to issue a pardon to Susan B. Anthony. And her staff said they were not accepting a pardon because she hadn't done anything wrong. Her big statement, which it was sort of the motto, I think, of the suffrage movement, is failure is impossible. And she marched many miles, gave many talks, and ultimately she succeeded.
Yeah.
She was quite a remarkable person. It's so interesting to go back and read about people in our history. And find it, because I just thoroughly enjoy the details that come up that make them a person, make them a human being. I was thinking about talking about Martin Luther King, but I decided to talk about Coretta Scott King, who was his wife, because I know a little bit about that story, and I'll share it with you. Coretta Scott was born in a tiny little Alabama town in 1927. The midwife at her birth was her grandmother, who had grown up in slavery. Her father, was sort of he had a farm, he had a little business. He was somewhat prominent, especially for an African American in that area of Alabama, and he was doing pretty well with a sawmill that his white neighbors came to him and said, "You have to sell us the sawmill." He refused, and they burned it down, and his house as well. So that's what Coretta grew up in. She was musically gifted. This is something I didn't know about her because I never heard her sing. I never heard her play the trumpet. I never heard her play the piano. But she was a musically gifted individual. She had an older sister named Edith. And I love the way Edith's name is spelled. It's E-D-Y-T-H-E. And Edith was the first black student who was brought to a special scholarship program at Antioch College, which was a leading light, in terms of educational institutions back then. And Coretta followed her sister there, and pursued her interest in music and went on to the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. When she got to Boston, she had no idea of how she was going to live. She just went on the, pure gumption that if she got there, she'd figure it out. And of course she did, with the help of people in the community, but, that gives you a sense of her pluck. I was friends with June Dobbs Butts, who was an intimate friend of the King family. June was one of the 6 daughters of John Wesley Dobbs. And the Dobbs family lived catty corner to the Kings, and the Dobbs kids played with the King kids. And June and Martin Luther King Jr. were the same age. And basically they went to high school together, they went to college. He was at Morehouse, she was at Spelman. And June was, a beauty. She was a beautiful woman when she was 89, and I think she was quite a beautiful woman when she was 19. She was Miss Maroon and White, the Morehouse homecoming queen. So she got a lot of attention. And ML, her friend, kind of insinuated that he was interested. And she said, I just looked at him. He was 5'6" and I was 5'9", and I said, this is not going to work out. I think June also knew that her friend ML was going to have a future in civil rights, and her whole life had been in civil rights. Her dad, John Wesley Dobbs, was one of the most prominent civil rights leaders in this area during his lifetime. She said she had a friend that dated ML, we'll just call him what she called him, for a while, but the friend knew that ML had a destiny. He was going to be somebody. He had a calling. And she backed away. So ML was looking for somebody to date up in Boston and talking to friends, and through a friend he met Coretta. Coretta absolutely knew what she was getting into. She couldn't know how rough the ride was going to be, that bullets would be fired into their home, that a bomb would be thrown into their home, that King would be arrested again and again, and of course, the final sad note was his assassination. She continued after his death to demonstrate, to be a presence in civil rights. She was arrested in front of the South African embassy in Washington on an anti-apartheid demonstration, and she was a very, very vocal proponent of LGBTQ rights. In a community where not many people were articulating that, where that was not going to necessarily make her popular, she was absolutely an advocate. Quite a remarkable story. And I wanted to talk a little bit about another person, just to give you one more profile and courage, so to speak. Harvey Milk. And I get a little bit misty there too. He was quite a vivid character. I never got to meet him. My time in San Francisco was after his time in San Francisco. And so I'm sorry that I never had an opportunity to personally meet him. He was evidently quite a storyteller and an entertainer, and had a very vivid personality. He was the first openly LGBTQ elected official in California, and he served on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, which is like the city council. He was from a middle-class Jewish family of Lithuanian background who ran a department store in Woodmere, New York called Milk's. And he said that he knew when he was a teenager that he was gay. He went to college, enlisted in the Navy, and served for a number of years, and then got caught up in a scandal where he was questioned about his sexual orientation and resigned. He worked as a public school teacher on Long Island, a stock analyst, and as a Broadway production assistant on Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar. Then he moved to San Francisco and opened a camera store on Castro Street. And at that time, Castro Street was sort of the unofficial heart of the gay world of San Francisco. But there were still a lot of homophobic people, and he got caught up in a number of things where businesses were trying to exclude new businesses because they were gay-owned. He ran for public office several times, and finally, you know, was elected. But during his public life, he received death threats every single day. You know, that was something that he lived with. And he lived with, you know, also being, you know, in the camera store, being, you know, in a very public space, and continuing to advocate for all the things that he believed in. He believed that he would be assassinated. He said, if a bullet should enter my brain, let that bullet destroy every closet door. He only served 1 year. He died in 1978 when he was 48 years old. Most of us are not called to extraordinary acts of courage. You know, courage is a word that says heart. It's kur. It means acting from the heart, being strong of heart. And, you know, I hear about acts of courage all the time. They're small acts. Friends of mine or people I know who are going to demonstrations, standing up against sexism and racism and ableism and transphobia and homophobia and religious intolerance, reaching out to those in need. You know, and just like us, Susan B. Anthony and Coretta Scott King and Harvey Milk all woke up and put one foot on the floor. And probably most days were not extraordinary days. Most days they went out and got milk or groceries or whatever, got a newspaper, had an interaction with a friend, did some kind of errand, went to the dentist, went to the doctor. But it all began with that, putting that one foot on the floor and moving out into the world. And so I know that just like we all did it today, we're going to do it tomorrow. We'll get up in the morning, we'll put the foot on the floor, and the day will unfold. And maybe there will be an opportunity for us to express some sort of courage, you know, to challenge something that needs to be challenged, or to help somebody who needs to be helped. I'm not going to be courageous every day in a big way, you know. In fact, some days I'm probably going to avoid some things that, you know, and I think that's really okay. I think that's truly all right to avoid things from time to time. But I just want to say that I feel lucky that I'm in a room full of courageous people, you know, and even though I don't know everybody who's here, I know lots of you. I know lots of you. I know your stories. I know that it wasn't easy to get here. And thank you. Thank you.
When I first started coming here in 1980, I didn't need those railings. But I need those railings now. Thank you so much. This is the pink book.
In the pink book, page 117.
117. Please stand if you're willing and able. quote this morning. Comes from, I have one, and I'll tell you. Well, maybe I won't. It's not going to pull up. It was a good one, I'll tell you. So, I'll put it in the email. Thank you very much for being here this morning.